Hi and welcome to our show. My name is Tracy Conklin and this is Our Nature Here, a show that focuses on the nature right here surrounding Portland, Oregon and throughout Oregon, an opportunity to learn about nature by going out and doing what we call birding, watching the natural habitat, and watching the birds that live in it. Today we have a special guest. We have John Rakestraw with us in the studio today, the writer of the book Birding Oregon. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us about birding, John. Why should we be interested in birding? And what are the birds that we're going to be looking at today?
Well, today we're going to be looking at ospreys and bald eagles, two large raptors that nest in the Portland area. If you're just starting out birding, raptors are a good group of birds to look at. They're what we call charismatic megafauna. They're large, flashy, easy to find, easy to see. So those are really good birds to start with.
Now we have these raptors, when you say in the Portland area, today we'll be looking at Sauvie Island, I believe. But these birds are actually throughout the Portland area?
Throughout the Portland area, wherever there's water. So along any of the major rivers, large lakes, you can find these raptors.
Now, how did you come to be involved with birding, and what is the real message for folks who are new to going out into the field about birding?
Birding can be whatever you want it to be. It can be just a casual hobby where you go outside and enjoy what there is to see. Some people get very intense on finding as many different species as possible, keeping track of the birds they see throughout their lifetime or throughout the year. Birding is a good way of collecting data on the health of our environment. In the early 1960s, it was bird watchers who started noticing that ospreys and bald eagles were becoming much harder to find. And that led to the discovery of the DDT and other pesticides that were causing such problems in the environment.
That's a very interesting and I think strong point in the Portland area, that we actually, we care very much about the environment here in Portland and Oregon. And you're saying that birding is actually an inroad into understanding our environment, or?
It is. Birds are an indication of the health of the environment. If you have a large diversity, large numbers of birds, you know something's working.
Now, when we go out to bird, can anybody do this? Do we need special equipment?
You need eyes and or ears. That's the minimum amount of requirement. A binocular is very helpful. It just enables you to see birds a little better. A guidebook helping you identify what you see, if that's important to you. Some people don't care what they're called, they just want to see birds. But if you can have a guide to identify what you're seeing, some sort of optics, a binocular, a spotting scope to help you see the birds, a guidebook or internet access to tell you where to go birding.
Now, John, you're the author of Birding Oregon, so I imagine that you know quite a bit about the entire state of Oregon as far as where we can go to watch. Today, I understand we're focusing particularly on Sauvie Island.
Yes, we went out to Sauvie Island to look for ospreys on the nest. That's a very good place to see them. You can also find bald eagles there as well. But actually anywhere in the Portland area, along the rivers, you can find both of these birds.
Now, you did a video of your search out on Sauvie Island,
yes.
Right? You went out and had an opportunity to record the environment and some of the birds. Do we have that video? Are we ready to show that?
Sauvie Island is very good for ospreys and other birds of prey. It's surrounded by water. You have the Columbia Slough and the Columbia River. So there are lots of fish for the ospreys to eat, which is their primary prey. And there's lots of nesting opportunity as well. You have the pilings on the Columbia Slough, you have dead trees, you have platforms that have been set up for nesting. There's just lots of opportunity, lots of food for them here. So I'm not sure what stage these ospreys are in their nesting, whether they have eggs yet or not. I noticed one bird just brought in nesting material and he's placing that in the nest. The other bird is sitting very tight. This leads me to believe that she's either sitting on eggs or very young birds. So we're at the end of Rentenauer Road on the north end of Sauvie Island. In the distance you have Sturgeon Lake beyond the trees. You have some wetland areas, great egrets, great blue herons. Has some cattle grazing in the pastures. Just a nice wide open space. Nice place to come to listen for birds, enjoy the fresh air. During the summer months you can walk throughout this area. In the winter it's closed off as a refuge for wintering waterfowl. But in the spring and summer, you can walk out throughout the area. And lots of hiking opportunities here. I don't know if they would feed here or if the Columbia River is just a little ways down. I know they fish there. They could fish at Sturgeon Lake, which is just the other side of the trees here. I noticed the signs that say the area is closed off you're supposed to stay on the road because of the ground nesting birds in the area. When you're watching birds of prey on their nests, you need to be very careful not to disturb them. A good rule of thumb is as long as you're not changing the bird's behavior, you're okay. If you get close enough that the birds become agitated or start moving around, then it's a good sign for you to back off. And it is important to remember that all birds of prey are protected by federal law, so you do not want to cause any disturbance. If they're disturbed at their nests, sometimes they will abandon their nests. So it's good to keep a respectful distance whenever you're out birding. I don't know, I assume it's the state wildlife agency put it there. And I'm just guessing it's to keep them from nesting on the power poles. Birds actually nest on active power lines. They can be electrocuted. If they happen to touch two wires at once, they can electrocute themselves. Or sometimes if the nesting material covers a couple of wires, they'll make a connection and short out the electrical service or injure the birds. You know, sometimes the utility companies will build platforms on top of the power poles so that the birds are above the wires. So it's much safer for them. We're at the observation platform along Reeder Road. And in the distance, behind the body of water here, you can see another osprey nest on a platform. One bird sitting on the nest while the other is on a perch above, feeding.
Fabulous, fabulous video. That is our very own Sauvie's Island.
It's right outside Portland's border, yeah.
My goodness. You know, it's not just we adults that need to see this. Don't forget to take your kids out there. Nothing in the world. We have one of our crew here whose grandson was watching the video that you just saw, and he said that the kid's eyes were glued to the screen. So don't forget, this is not just about you. This is about the whole world getting tuned into nature. And we believe here at This Nature Here that birding is a darn good way to get there.
It's an excellent way to get there. It's easier to see birds than almost any other kind of animal. If you go out looking for mammals, they're usually nocturnal, they're usually hiding. Same with reptiles and amphibians. Birds are always around. They're big, colorful, they're flying through the air. It's really hard to miss them.
And Sauvie's Island, you were just looking at the map. This is, what would you call it, ecosystem of its own?
It's a neat area. There's a lot of variety of habitats on Sauvie Island. You have farms, you have oak savanna, you have wetlands, you have the Columbia Slough and the Columbia River. So it's just a nice variety of habitats, and the more different habitats you have, the more diversity of birds you'll find. And
of course, we're concentrating on Sauvie's Island. We'll come back to other regions of Oregon later that John has written about. But this one's so close to Portland and so rich, and this is nesting season?
It is indeed. The ospreys are nesting now. The bald eagles are just wrapping up. They tend to start fairly early, but there are still young bald eagles either on or very near the nests. Ospreys are probably raising young birds right now.
Bald eagles right here in Portland?
Right here in Portland.
Now, these large raptors, will we see them hunting? And by the way, let's be clear about this. When we go out birding, there have got to be ways that you begin to identify which birds are which.
Start with the big easy ones. It's really hard to miss an adult bald eagle. They're big and brown with a white head and a white tail. The young bald eagles tend to be darker and mottled, but they have a fairly distinctive shape, and they're the biggest raptor out there right now.
Where does that come from, the bald eagle?
The name, it doesn't actually mean hairless, as I can relate to. It has something to do with white. So it basically means white-headed eagle.
First, though, we're talking about the osprey. Now, what kind of bird is this?
Osprey is another type of raptor. They eat primarily fish. They will eat other things, but their main bread and butter is fish. So you'll almost always find them around water, and they capture fish, swimming near the surface, although they can dive up to about 18 inches down if they need to. 18
inches under the water?
Under the water, yes.
So that's 1.5 feet under the water. They're virtually swimming birds.
They're plunging down, and on rare occasions they'll grab something that's a little too big and they get pulled under, so they have to learn to go for the right size fish.
These nests, we were watching the video, and the nests are large. They're virtually the size of our table here today.
Osprey nests can be quite large. Bald eagle nests can be enormous, and the birds will use the same nest year after year, and they add to it every year. So the nest gets bigger every year that they use it. So
when we're going out to Sauvie's Island, we're going to be looking at established nests that are already there? Yes.
There are nests that have, as I say, been used year after year. Bald eagle nests are easy to see because they are so large, and they're usually in a large tree. The ospreys you'll often find on nesting platforms or on pilings out in the river.
And these are the ones that we saw with sticks the size of your finger?
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing. Do we have protection for these animals? Isn't it true that some of these animals were near extinction? Is it that?
Both osprey and bald eagle fell to dangerously low numbers in the early 1960s through contamination of insecticides, pesticides, DDT. Once those substances were banned, the birds started making a fairly rapid recovery. It wasn't an immediate recovery because those types of chemicals remain in the environment. They don't break down. So it takes a while to get it out of the system. And some of these chemicals, while they were banned in the United States, were still used in South America. And ospreys migrate to Central and South America in the wintertime, so they're still exposed to those chemicals.
Now, this is the thing that interests me. So when we go out to watch birds, we're going to see them at one point in their life, primarily?
Yes.
And especially these osprey and bald eagles,
yes.
They're passing through.
The ospreys are here for the summer, and they will fly south for the winter. Bald eagles you can find all year long. And in fact, you'll find more in the winter because birds from further north come down to Oregon to spend the winter.
Isn't that amazing?
So we have our resident bald eagles, and then we have visitors from the north in the wintertime.
And now, it's a little difficult to tell by looking at the screen. How large are these birds when if we had one sitting right
If we had one, it would certainly stand about this tall on the table. Bald eagles are the largest raptor in Oregon.
And the osprey?
Ospreys are about half that size.
Somewhere about this size.
Yes. If you see if you're familiar with red-tailed hawks flying over the city, an osprey is about the size of a red-tailed hawk, but a little more slender.
Are they only carnivores?
Yes. Yes, osprey eat primarily fish, a few other animals. Bald eagles eat whatever they can find, carrion, fish, waterfowl, mammals, whatever they can find.
I'm a Native American from this environment, actually the coast of Oregon, and I know a lot of hunters who maybe could learn something from going out and watching the birds hunt. How did you come to be a birder?
I've always been interested in wildlife in general. When I was growing up, I grew up in rural Indiana, and so I was always outside looking for wildlife, fishing. When I got my first job out of college, I moved to a small town in western Kansas where there was no water, so I couldn't go fishing anymore. So I started birding a little more full-time, and throughout the years, I've just pretty much taken over all my hobby time.
Now, we did talk about the bald. Everybody knows the bald eagle. I hope you know we Americans know the bald eagle. What about this osprey? What are the markings that...
You'll recognize ospreys. They're a very dark blackish brown on top, white underneath with a dark stripe through the eye. When they fly with a little bit of a crook in their wings. You can recognize them from a great distance because their wings are just a little bit kinked.
Kind of like an angle in
bent
the shape.
back at the wrist, yes.
Oh, okay.
Whereas bald eagles, when you see them flying at a distance, they're flat as a board. And their white head and white tail sometimes gets lost in the sky, so it just looks like a brown board sailing through the sky.
Now, these osprey, I'm sure we'll talk about hawks and later in our programming here. Are we likely to mix them up with hawks if we go out to Sauvie's Island? Are those common out there also?
Sauvie's Island is a great place for raptors in general, especially in the winter. But even in the summer, you'll still find red-tailed hawks, kestrels, harriers.
So we want to look for that angled on the wings.
Yes, white underneath and that little kink in the wings. And then the dark stripe through the eye.
And a dark stripe through the eye. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful bird.
Yeah.
Now, the nesting platforms, these are they some of them man-made?
Some of them are man-made. We saw one in the video next to the power lines. So you encourage the birds to nest away from the power lines. Another osprey nest we saw in the video was on the pilings in the Columbia Slough. It's just a nice flat
and those are there for shipping reasons?
I believe so. I don't know what they're there for, but the ospreys love them, and you'll often see birds perched on those pilings.
That is fascinating to me. Now, when they're hatching, what are we looking for the small birds, and how long do they stay in these nests?
They'll stay in the nest at least a month, maybe a little more. So you'll see the parents hunting for them, bringing them food to the nest. As the birds get bigger, they start to move around the nest more. They'll start exercising their wings, and you'll see that behavior quite often.
I'm a little bit of a techie, and I've enjoyed at various times photography. I imagine this is a great opportunity for people that enjoy optics.
Yeah.
Is this, we of course maybe want to take some binoculars with us?
A binocular is very helpful. If you have a spotting scope, that's good for more distant birds. If you want to stay in one spot and just enjoy watching them for a while, setting up a scope on a tripod and just watching the nest for a while can be quite fun.
Now, our emphasis here is once again on this nesting out there at Sauvie's Island, which, as we say, is very easy for us to get to here from Portland. What are some of the best places out there to visit?
On Sauvie Island, some of my favorite places are Wapato Access Greenway State Park, otherwise known as Virginia Lake. There's actually a state park on the island. It's free to park there. Another favorite spot is Rettenauer Road, which is on the north end of the island. And you can park at one end and walk the length of the road. It's about a mile. And there's habitat on both sides of the road. It's just a nice walk year-round. And you can see all sorts of birds along there. That is part of the state wildlife area, so you do need a parking permit to park there. You can get the parking permits at any of the stores on the island.
Yes, I've been out there, and there is a, immediately as you turn off the bridge, there's a store there. I can actually walk in there and get a permit.
You can get either a daily permit or an annual permit.
So tell me, is this going to bust my bank to get a permit to go and
If you're going for the day, it's a few dollars to park.
Just a few dollars?
A few dollars.
Under 10, 3, 5, something
somewhere
like
in
that?
there, yes.
We want you to know that in Portland, you can actually go to Sauvie's Island very quickly by automobile. You can also go there by bus. And those of you that love biking, you can bus your bike out there and take the routes from there. Or we do, for those of you that rack your bikes on top of your cars, there are parking spaces just over the Sauvie Island Bridge, and you can park your car there. I believe it's free.
Free parking there, yes.
There's a little convenience store that we'll talk about, getting permits where they're needed for parking, and off you go. Off you'll be able to go into the environment on your bike. It's a gorgeous trip. Everybody should do it. Do we have that video ready? Hope you enjoyed that video. I know I did. I hope you'll come back too and watch Our Nature Here. This is an extraordinary opportunity for you and your friends to learn about the local environment and to give yourself a darn good reason to go out and see it. We want to thank John Rakestraw. He'll be back again to join us, right, John?
Sure will.
We're going to talk about places here in the local environment. Right in Portland, there are great wetlands and parks. Some of this footage that you're watching right now, in fact, comes from, which did you say?
Ridgefield National Wildlife Refuge in Washington.
Oh,
just
very
across
close.
the river.
Just across the river. We have so much right here in Portland. You know, this nature here, we don't have to travel overseas. We don't have to travel by car long distances. We'll be finding out about more places that you can observe right here in Portland, Oregon by taking a bus and seeing some, what's that wetlands that's downtown Portland or on the river?
Oh, there's Willamette Park, there's Oaks Bottom, there's all sorts of places to go.
So we're going to get a chance with John coming back to describe to us even more clearly about the tools that we need, the opportunities that are out there, and to encourage always your children, your friends. You may know some elderly folks who really don't have that much to do but watch TV, and think of how much their life could grow if with you they would go out to a place like Sauvie Island or one of these great nature outlets that we have here in Portland. Don't forget that these birds are an extraordinary indicator of what our planet is going through in terms of pollutants and in terms of overbuilding. Luckily, here in Portland we have these urban growth boundaries, and so we'll be able to keep watching, and we'll be able to educate ourselves and others about the nature here, the nature wherever you are in America that you can be looking at by watching and collecting, I think you said. Didn't you say collecting, John?
I consider birding a type of collecting, but you're collecting experiences.
Collecting experiences for the opportunity for youth, for friends and family visiting from out of town. Hey, don't take them to the opera, take them out and show them some nature, and have a reason, a kind of an excuse to go out there and say, well, I've seen 2 or 3 of these birds on my list and I want to see some more. And when's the last time you saw a bald eagle? Please join us out in nature, and please join us right back here the next time we come back to this nature here, when we will be talking about more birds, more places for you to visit. John will be back, right?
I'll be back.
John's going to share even more of his wisdom, and you will get the chance that you need to learn about what you can do right here, this nature here. Thanks for watching. Great show, John.